hope you guys are all entranced by this Subway Surfers gameplay, because I know I am.
That is an astute observation, Mr. SquarePants. This is because we are all extremely dopamine fried.
But what does this exactly mean, though? How can someone become dopamine fried?
Great question, Mr. SquarePants. That's why we formed the group, the Dopamine Dudes, to educate you all about this very process.
But what is dopamine, and how does it fry our brains?
Dopamine is a neurotransmitter that plays a role in the brain's reward pathway, which is meant to reward behaviors associated with survival. Neurotransmitters are messenger molecules that relay signals between neurons through the synapse. Think of neurotransmitters as letters, carrying important information, and synapses as mailboxes, where these letters are delivered. Dopamine is produced in an area of the brain called the midbrain. According to a 2022 article by Cleveland Clinic, dopamine plays a role in sleep, mood, heart rate, learning, and attention. Diseases such as ADD and Parkinson's are linked to lower dopamine levels, which can make one feel tired, moody, and unmotivated. On the other hand, high dopamine levels can lead to addiction and obesity.
So now that we know the role of dopamine, how does one become dopamine desensitized?
Dopamine desensitization starts when you're doing something pleasurable. The brain releases dopamine to reward this behavior. Dopamine then mediates signals that cause you to feel good, and this is followed by a come down or a crash. Next, one may seek to replicate this behavior that causes the release of dopamine, which can lead to an addiction. Over time, your brain becomes less sensitive to dopamine, so it seeks the same feelings with decreasing sensitivity. For example, if you develop a tolerance to spicy food, you tend to crave spicier and spicier food. A more serious consequence of dopamine desensitization is drug usage. According to a 2020 article by Wise and Robel, habitual use of addictive drugs results in downregulation of high-affinity D2 receptors. You can imagine these receptors as a control knob on a stereo. They regulate the strength of the dopamine response in the brain because they have a strong desire to bind to dopamine.
Kill me! Am I cooked?
No, Mr. SquarePants, and don't be afraid, as you are not alone. We know that dopamine desensitization is extremely prevalent amongst teenagers and young adults. But why is this the case? Most of us experience dopamine desensitization due to excessive usage of social media. In order to prevent this, try cutting out social media and video games for 30 days and then reintroduce them back into your life in moderation. In short, touch grass. To sum up, dopamine is a neurotransmitter produced in the midbrain that plays a role in the brain's reward pathway. Dopamine desensitization happens through a repeated chase of a behavior that releases dopamine. To make it simpler to understand, think of dopamine desensitization as overusing a car horn. Eventually, it loses its effect. When we overstimulate our brain's reward system, the horn, or dopamine, stops working as effectively. Keep doing this process and you're well on your way to become like us and become officially dopamine fried.
Thank you, dopamine dudes. Let's get fried.